You are dying. Not in the sense of a hospital bed or a sudden accident, but in a way that is far more insidious because it happens while you are wide awake, scrolling, and pretending that you have time. Every hour you spend succumbing to the cheap, flickering lights of instant gratification is a brick laid in the tomb of your potential. You aren't just procrastinating. You are committing a slow-motion suicide of the soul. You are trading the man you were meant to become for a hit of dopamine that lasts 3 seconds and leaves you feeling hollowed out, like a rotted tree standing in a forest of giants. Look at your hands. Look at the room around you. If you are honest, painfully, brutally honest, you know that the version of you that exists right now is a ghost of the man who was promised. You have let the world soften you. You have let the algorithms dictate your focus. You have become a consumer in a world that demands creators, a follower in a world that starves for leaders. And the cost? The cost isn't just a missed deadline or a messy room. The cost is the respect of the people you love. The cost is the look in your father's eyes when he realizes his legacy ends with a man who couldn't put down his phone. The cost is the silent, suffocating realization at 3 a.m. that you are exactly where you were last year, only older, weaker, and more tired. But what if the problem isn't your lack of motivation? What if the very map you've been using to navigate your life was drawn by people who want you to stay lost? Most Western self-help tells you to just do it or find your passion, as if discipline is something you can just pick up at the grocery store. It's a lie. Motivation is a fair-weather friend. It's a spark that vanishes the moment the wind of reality blows. Today, we are burning that map. We are going to explore a system that wasn't built in a sleek Silicon Valley office, but in the blood-soaked soil of feudal Japan and the silent stone temples of the East. This is a system designed not for productivity, but for survival in the face of total chaos. It is a system of 8 specific stages that will dismantle the weak identity you've built and replace it with something forged in iron. We are going to combine the neurological precision of modern Stanford science with the ancient, unyielding logic of the samurai. We are going to talk about concepts you've never heard of, principles like shuhari, wabi-sabi, and gammon, not as abstract ideas, but as tactical weapons. By the end of this video, you won't just have tips. You will have a blueprint for a total identity shift. You will understand why your brain has been fighting you and how to force it into submission. You will learn how to turn your failures into your greatest strengths and how to build a life that commands respect without you ever having to say a word. But I have to warn you, this is not for the casual viewer. If you are looking for a quick hack to feel better for 10 minutes, click away now. This video is for the man who is tired of his own excuses. It is for the man who is ready to kill his former self to let the new one breathe. If that is you, then you are in the right place. This channel is dedicated to the few who refuse to be mediocre. We don't do shallow here. We go deep into the psychology of the masculine spirit. If you want to join this brotherhood of high achievers, hit the subscribe button now and turn on notifications. Your transformation starts with the decision to pay attention when everyone else is distracted. The clock is ticking. Your life is leaking out of the cracks in your discipline. It is time to plug the holes. It is time to stop being a spectator in your own tragedy. Let's begin the process of reprogramming your reality. Welcome to the path of the samurai. Let's look at the first stage of the transformation, the realization of the breaking point. To understand the path forward, we must first look into the mirror of a life gone cold. Meet Elias. Elias isn't a failure in the eyes of society, he is something much worse. He is fine. He is 32 years old, living in a suburban apartment that smells faintly of stale takeout and unwashed laundry. His life is a series of almosts and tomorrows. He wakes up not to the sun, but to the aggressive, jarring screech of an iPhone alarm at 7 a.m. His first act of the day isn't a prayer, a stretch, or a moment of gratitude, it is the thumb scroll. Before his eyes have even fully adjusted to the light, he is drowning in the lives of people he doesn't know, comparing his messy sheets to their curated perfections. By 7:15 a.m., his brain is already fried, his dopamine receptors already leaking, his focus already fractured into 1,000 pieces. He drags himself to a job that pays the bills but starves his ambition. He sits in a cubicle under flickering fluorescent lights, the hum of the air conditioner acting as the soundtrack to his disappearing youth. He opens spreadsheets. He replies to emails with "per my last message." He watches the clock with the intensity of a condemned man, waiting for 5 p.m. so he can finally start his life. But we know the truth, don't we? When 5 p.m. comes, Elias is exhausted. He tells himself he worked hard, so he deserves a break. He goes home, sits on the same spot on the sofa, the one where the cushion has started to sag from the weight of his indecision, and he relaxes. This relaxation consists of 4 hours of streaming shows he won't remember tomorrow and scrolling through short-form videos that numb the low-frequency hum of anxiety in his chest. This was Elias's routine for 3 years. 3 years of "I'll start the gym on Monday." 3 years of "I'll write that business plan when I have more energy." He was living in the great wait. He was waiting for a version of himself that was more disciplined, more energetic, and more capable to magically arrive at his door. He didn't realize that the man he was waiting for was being murdered every single evening by the man he currently was. The breaking point didn't happen during a massive catastrophe. It happened on a Tuesday, in the most humiliatingly ordinary way possible. Elias was at his younger brother's house for a birthday dinner. His brother, Mark, was everything Elias used to be: sharp, physically fit, and present. Mark's 5-year-old son, Leo, ran up to Elias with a football, his eyes wide with the innocent expectation that his uncle was a hero. "Play with me, Uncle Elias." Elias stood up, but as he did, his knees popped with the sound of a man twice his age. Within 5 minutes of running in the backyard, Elias was gasping. His lungs felt like they were filled with hot sand. He had to sit down on a lawn chair, sweat beading on his forehead, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He looked over and saw his brother watching him. It wasn't a look of anger, it was a look of pity. It was the look you give a dying animal. Later that evening, Elias went to the bathroom and caught his reflection in the mirror under the harsh, unforgiving vanity lights. He saw the soft puffiness around his jawline. He saw the dullness in his eyes, the lights-out look of someone who has given up on their own greatness. But the real blow came when he stepped back into the hallway and overheard a conversation between his brother and his mother in the kitchen. "I'm worried about him, Mom," Mark said quietly. "He's just fading. He talks about all these big plans, but he's been in the same spot for years. It's like he's a ghost in his own life." His mother's response was a heavy, silent sigh that cut deeper than any insult. "He was always so bright," she whispered. "I don't know where that boy went." Elias stood in the hallway, paralyzed. The humiliation was a physical weight, a cold stone in his stomach. He realized in that moment that he wasn't just procrastinating. He was losing the people who mattered. He was becoming a cautionary tale. He walked back to his sagging sofa that night, but he didn't turn on the TV. He sat in the dark. The silence of the apartment felt like a vacuum, sucking the air out of his lungs. He realized that if he didn't change, not on Monday, not next year, but now, the ghost his brother described would be all that was left. He felt the hot sting of tears, not of sadness, but of pure, unadulterated shame. He had reached the edge of the cliff. He could either jump into the abyss of permanent mediocrity, or he could find a way to climb. But he didn't know how to climb. His legs were weak, his mind was cluttered, and his willpower was non-existent. He needed something more than a motivational quote. He needed a master. He needed a system that didn't care about his feelings. Elias stared at his hands in the dark, the same hands that had wasted thousands of hours, and he made a silent vow. He would find the man his mother remembered. He would kill the ghost. But as the clock ticked toward midnight, the old voice whispered, "You can't do it. You've tried before. This time, Elias didn't argue. He just sat there, waiting for the first light of a different kind of morning. Shame is a powerful catalyst, but it is a poor fuel for a long journey. Elias spent the next 48 hours in a frantic, desperate attempt to fix everything. He woke up at 4:30 a.m., tried to run 5 miles, attempted to cook a week's worth of healthy meals, and deleted every social media app on his phone. By Thursday afternoon, he was broken. His muscles were screaming, his brain was foggy from the sudden caffeine withdrawal, and the siren song of his old habits was louder than ever. He had fallen into the motivation trap, the belief that a massive problem requires a massive, immediate explosion of effort. He was trying to bench press 500 pounds without ever having learned how to lift the bar. It was during this crash that Elias remembered a name he had heard mentioned in hushed, respectful tones in a small corner of a philosophy forum: Kenji. Kenji was not a guru in the modern sense. He didn't have a flashy website or a fleet of supercars. He was a former artisan, a man who had spent decades mastering the traditional Japanese art of kintsugi, the repair of broken pottery with gold, before retiring to a small, Spartan house on the outskirts of the city. Elias drove there on a Saturday morning, his hands shaking on the steering wheel. He expected a temple. He found a modest home with a gravel garden that looked as though every stone had been placed with surgical intent. Kenji was older than Elias expected, with skin like weathered parchment and eyes that seemed to see through the ghost Elias had become. He didn't invite Elias in for tea and platitudes. He was kneeling in his garden, moving a single rake through the gray stones. "I can't do it," Elias blurted out, the words tumbling over each other. "I tried to change. I tried to be disciplined. I tried to be the man my family expects, but I'm too far gone. I'm broken." Kenji didn't look up from the gravel. "Everyone is broken," he said, his voice like the dry rustle of autumn leaves. "The question is not whether you are broken, but whether you are willing to be repaired. Most men want the gold without the cracks. They want the mastery without the clay." Elias began to recount his failed week, the 4:30 a.m. alarms, the grueling runs, the sudden, violent shift in his diet. Kenji finally stopped raking and looked at him. A small, sad smile touched his lips. "You are trying to storm the castle of your own mind," Kenji said. "But the mind is a clever defender. If you attack it with a massive army of new habits, it will simply close the gates and starve you out. You cannot win a war against your own nervous system through sheer force of will. Willpower is a drop of water in a desert of habit. It evaporates before it hits the ground." "Then what do I do?" Elias asked, his voice cracking. "If I can't use willpower, I have nothing." "You have the smallest unit of truth," Kenji replied. He stood up slowly and walked toward a small wooden bench. "You have been lying to yourself for 10 years. You tell yourself you will work, and you don't. You tell yourself you will eat well, and you don't. Your problem is not laziness, it is that you are a man who cannot trust his own word. Your internal compass is shattered. To fix it, we do not build a skyscraper. We find one solid brick." Kenji reached into the sleeve of his robe and pulled out a small, common kitchen timer. He set it for exactly 2 minutes. "This is your task," he said, handing the timer to Elias. "For the next 7 days, you will do one thing. You will stand in this garden, or in your own room, and you will do nothing but observe your breath for 2 minutes. No more. No less." Elias stared at the plastic timer. 2 minutes? That's it? I told you, I need to fix my life. I need to get back to the gym, I need to save my career, You need to keep a promise, Kenji interrupted, his voice turning sharp. You are currently incapable of keeping a big promise. So, you will keep a microscopic one. You think this task is beneath you. That is your ego talking, the same ego that led you to the sagging sofa. If you cannot master 2 minutes, you will never master 20 years. This is the principle of Kaizen, the art of continuous, tiny improvement. But it is also something deeper. It is the ritual of the small win. You are going to prove to your brain that when you say you will do something, it actually happens. Kenji turned back to his garden, signaling the end of the meeting. Go home, Elias. 2 minutes. If you do 2 minutes and 1 second, you have failed. If you do 1 minute and 59 seconds, you have failed. Be precise. Be honest. Be small. Elias drove home feeling a strange mix of relief and insult. It felt too easy. It felt ridiculous. But that evening, standing in the middle of his messy living room, he set the timer. For 120 seconds, he did nothing but breathe. His mind screamed at him. It told him he was wasting time. It reminded him of the emails he hadn't sent and the weight he hadn't lost. But he stayed. When the timer dinged, a strange sensation washed over him. It wasn't motivation, it was a tiny, flickering spark of integrity. For the first time in years, Elias hadn't lied to himself. He had made a commitment, and he had executed it to the letter. He went to bed that night without the usual crushing weight of "I failed again." He had done the microscopic task. He was still a ghost, perhaps, but for 2 minutes, he had been a man of his word. He didn't know it yet, but the gates of the castle were beginning to creak open, not because of a battering ram, but because he had found the key to the side door. The second week of Elias's transformation began not with a bang, but with the quiet, rhythmic ticking of a plastic kitchen timer. To an outsider, Elias looked ridiculous. A grown man, standing in the center of a cluttered apartment, staring at a wall for 120 seconds. But inside the theater of Elias's mind, a revolution was underway. By the fourth day, the microtask had ceased to be a chore and had become a sanctuary. For those 2 minutes, the ghost was silent. There was no past to regret and no future to fear. There was only the breath, the floor beneath his feet, and the integrity of a kept promise. Elias returned to Kenji's garden on the 8th day. He expected a congratulatory pat on the back, but the old master didn't even look up from his pruning. "You have kept the promise," Kenji said, his shears clicking against a bonsai branch. The ego is confused. It wonders why it feels satisfied with such a small thing. Now, we introduce the architecture that will hold the weight of your future. We move from Kaizen to Ikigai and Harahachi-bu. Kenji sat on the wooden porch and motioned for Elias to join him. You have spent your life in pursuit of more. More money, more comfort, more stimulation. But the Japanese secret to discipline is not more, it is enough. We call this Harahachi-bu, the practice of eating until you are only 80% full. In the West, you feast until you are sick, then you wonder why you are lethargic. You consume content until your brain is bloated, then you wonder why you cannot focus. He leaned in closer, his gaze intense. Discipline is the art of leaving the table while you still have a taste for the meal. If you want to master your life, you must stop seeking the 100% of pleasure. When you stop at 80%, you leave room for the spirit to move. You leave room for hunger. And hunger, Elias, is the mother of all discipline. Kenji explained that by intentionally stopping short of total satiation, whether in food, entertainment, or even work, Elias was reclaiming the territory of his own desires. He was no longer a slave to the fullness that leads to rot. This was the foundation for Ikigai, the reason for being. Elias had previously thought of his purpose as a grand, distant destination, but Kenji reframed it as a daily alignment. Your Ikigai is the intersection of what you love, what you are good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for, Kenji said. But you cannot find it while you are stuffed with the garbage of 1,000 distractions. By practicing the 80% rule, you create the vacuum necessary for your true purpose to rise to the surface. Elias began to apply these hidden philosophies immediately. He didn't just meditate for 2 minutes, he began to apply Harahachi-bu to his digital life. Instead of scrolling until his eyes burned, he set a hard limit. He would stop while he still felt a sliver of curiosity. He applied it to his meals, pushing the plate away when the first feeling of not hungry arrived, rather than waiting for full. The physical shift was almost immediate. By not overtaxing his digestive system or his neural pathways, Elias found a reservoir of energy he hadn't felt since his early 20s. His morning fog began to lift. The small wins of the 2-minute meditation sessions began to aggregate, creating a phenomenon known in neuroscience as success spirals. Each time he successfully stopped at 80% or completed his 2 minutes of stillness, his brain released a small, controlled dose of dopamine. Unlike the flood of dopamine from a video game or a sugar-laden snack, this was a steady, building fire. He felt a sense of momentum, a mental inertia that was finally moving in the right direction. He started to clean his apartment, not in a frantic burst, but 5 minutes at a time. He started to look at his work spreadsheets not as a prison, but as a puzzle. He was beginning to experience Zanshin, the state of relaxed alertness. He was no longer reacting to his life, he was beginning to deliberate it. On the 10th day, Elias did something he hadn't done in years. He went for a walk in the evening without headphones. No music, no podcasts, no external voices. He just walked. He watched the way the streetlights reflected in the puddles. He smelled the evening air, a mix of rain and wood smoke. For the first time, he felt like he belonged in his own skin. He wasn't the ghost anymore. He was a man in training. But Kenji had warned him. Early wins are dangerous, the master had said. They create the illusion of victory. They make you think the path is a straight line. But the world is full of friction, and your old self is not dead yet. He is merely sleeping, waiting for a moment of weakness to strike. Elias felt invincible that night. He felt as though he had cracked the code. He didn't realize that the inevitability of the fall was already lurking in the shadows of the coming week. He was high on the small wins, unaware that he was about to face a pressure test that would make his 2-minute meditations look like child's play. He had found the philosophy, and he had tasted the momentum. Now, he was about to learn the most painful lesson of all, how to fail like a samurai. The air in Elias's apartment felt different during the 3rd week, lighter, cleaner, filled with the scent of possibility. But the universe has a way of testing a bridge once the foundation is poured. For Elias, the test came in the form of a Friday afternoon phone call from his boss. The company was restructuring. A performance review that was usually a formality turned into a cold, clinical dissection of Elias's past 3 years of mediocrity. Though he had been improving for 2 weeks, the paper trail of his ghost years was long. He was put on a formal improvement plan. If his numbers didn't hit a near impossible target by the end of the month, he was out. Elias hung up the phone, and the silence of his apartment suddenly felt suffocating again. The momentum he had built over the last 14 days felt like a paper shield against a tidal wave. The old voice, the one he thought he had silenced with his 2-minute meditations, roared back to life with a vengeance. "See," it hissed. "It doesn't matter. 2 minutes of breathing won't save your mortgage. You're a failure who started too late." The pressure was a physical weight on his chest. He felt the familiar, magnetic pull of the sagging sofa. He felt the itch in his palm to grab his phone and drown his anxiety in a 4-hour scroll. And that night, for the first time in 2 weeks, Elias broke. It started with one cheat meal to calm his nerves, a greasy bag of fast food that left him feeling sluggish and ashamed. Then came this just one episode of a mind-numbing show. By 2 a.m., the kitchen timer sat on the counter, dusty and ignored. Elias was back in the abyss. He woke up Saturday at noon, the sunlight accusing him through the blinds. He felt a level of self-loathing that was deeper than before because this time, he had known the light and turned away from it. He spent the entire weekend in a shame spiral, convinced that his 2 weeks of progress were now a zero. He felt like a fraud. He had broken the streak, and in his mind, breaking the streak meant the game was over. On Monday, he drove to Kenji's house, not to seek guidance, but to quit. He walked into the garden, his head hung low, his eyes rimmed with the red of a man who hadn't slept or washed. "I'm done," Elias said, his voice flat. "I failed. I went back to the couch. I ate the garbage. I missed the meditations. The system didn't work because I'm the broken variable. You should give that timer to someone who isn't a lost cause." Kenji was sitting on the porch, holding a small ceramic bowl. He didn't look disappointed. Instead, he reached out and deliberately dropped the bowl onto the stone path. It shattered into a dozen jagged pieces. Elias flinched. "What are you doing?" Elias asked. "Look at the bowl," Kenji commanded. "Is it finished? Is its story over because it met the floor?" Kenji knelt and began to gather the pieces. In the West, you seek a perfection that does not exist. You think discipline is a straight line, and the moment it bends, you think it is broken. This is a fragile way to live. We have a different philosophy, wabi-sabi. It is the celebration of imperfection, of the weathered, and the broken. He led Elias into his workshop, where he kept a small pot of gold-dusted lacquer. "This is kintsugi," Kenji explained. "When a bowl breaks, we do not throw it away. We repair the cracks with gold. We don't hide the fracture, we highlight it. The bowl becomes stronger at the broken places, and it becomes more beautiful because it has a history. It is no longer just a mass-produced object, it is a survivor." He looked Elias directly in the eyes. "You think your weekend of failure erased your 2 weeks of growth. That is the logic of a child. Your failure is the crack. Wabi-sabi teaches us that the crack is where the gold goes. Every time you stumble and choose to stand up again, you are layering your discipline with gold. A man who has never failed has no history. He has no gold. He is just a bowl that hasn't hit the floor yet." Elias felt a strange shift in his perspective. He had been treating his discipline like a glass ornament that had to be kept in a vacuum. Kenji was telling him it was a blade that needed to be forged in fire and hammered through resistance. "The Japanese also have a word for what you must do now," Kenji continued. "Gambaru. It is often translated as to do one's best, but the literal meaning is to stand firm. It is the tenacity to persist through the ugly phases of growth. You had a bad weekend. So what? The question isn't why did I fail? The question is, will I return?" Kenji handed Elias a small piece of sandpaper. "The shame you feel is just your ego crying because it isn't perfect. Kill the ego. Accept the crack. Apply the gold. Go home and set the timer for 2 minutes. Not because you are starting over, but because you are continuing the story. Your improvement plan at work is not a death sentence, it is the floor hitting the bowl. Now, show me the gold." Elias left the garden with a different kind of fire. He realized that the what the hell effect, the tendency to spiral further after a single mistake, was a trap of his own making. He didn't need to be perfect, he needed to be persistent. He went home, picked up the plastic timer, and cleared a space on his table. He wasn't the man he was 3 weeks ago. He was a man with a crack in his armor, and for the first time, he realized that the crack made him dangerous. He was no longer afraid of failing, because he finally knew how to repair himself. While Elias was learning the poetry of the soul through Kenji, the transformation he was experiencing was actually being mapped out by billions of firing neurons within his cranium. To understand why Elias was finally succeeding where he had failed for a decade, we must step away from the garden and into the laboratory. What Kenji called microtasks, neuroscientists at Stanford and MIT called limbic friction management. Your brain is not a single, unified entity, it is a battleground between two distinct systems. First, there is the basal ganglia, the ancient, primitive part of the brain responsible for habits, survival, and the autopilot mode that kept Elias on his sagging sofa for years. Second, there is the prefrontal cortex, the modern seat of executive function, logic, and long-term planning. When Elias tried to wake up at 4:30 a.m. and run 5 miles on a whim, he was asking his prefrontal cortex to perform a Herculean feat of strength against the mountain of habit stored in his basal ganglia. This is why willpower fails. Willpower is a metabolic resource, and like the glucose in your blood, it is finite. When you experience decision fatigue, your prefrontal cortex essentially shuts down, handing the keys of your life back to the basal ganglia. The ghost takes over because the ghost is energy efficient. The Japanese concept of Kaizen, the 2-minute task, is a surgical strike against this biological reality. By making the task painfully small, Elias was keeping his limbic friction at a near zero level. He was performing an action that was so easy it didn't trigger the amygdala's alarm system. The amygdala, the brain's fear center, perceives major life changes as a threat to the status quo. It doesn't care if the change is good, it only cares that it is different. But the amygdala ignores a 2-minute meditation. It's too small to be a threat. As Elias repeated these 2-minute sessions, a process called myelination was occurring. Myelin is a fatty tissue that wraps around the axons of your neurons. Think of it like insulation on an electrical wire. Every time Elias chose the timer over the scroll, he was firing a specific neural circuit. With each repetition, the brain layered more myelin onto that circuit, increasing the speed and efficiency of the signal. Over time, the discipline circuit became faster and stronger than the procrastination circuit. This is the physical reality of identity shift. You aren't just changing your mind, you are physically reinsulating your brain to favor a new version of yourself. Furthermore, we must look at the role of dopamine. Most people think of dopamine as the chemical of pleasure, but neuroscience reveals it is actually the chemical of pursuit and anticipation. When Elias engaged in doom scrolling, he was triggering tonic dopamine spikes, cheap, rapid-fire bursts that eventually desensitized the receptors, leading to a dopamine crash. This is why he felt hollow after hours of entertainment. However, by using Kenji small wins, Elias was tapping into phasic dopamine. By achieving a goal, no matter how small, the brain releases a reward signal that strengthens the association between effort and satisfaction. He was literally retraining his brain to enjoy the act of being disciplined. Shutterstock. But the most profound shift happened in the way Elias handled the fall in Chapter 5. In a typical brain, a failure triggers a massive drop in dopamine and a spike in cortisol, the stress hormone. This leads to the what the hell effect, where the brain seeks immediate comfort, junk food, distraction, to mitigate the stress of the failure. By introducing wabi-sabi, the acceptance of imperfection, Elias was utilizing a cognitive tool called reframing. Researchers at Harvard have shown that when we view a stressor as a challenge or a lesson rather than a threat or verdict, our physiological response changes. Instead of a debilitating cortisol spike, the brain maintains a state of arousal that can be used to fuel the return to work. Elias was moving from outcome-based habits to identity-based habits, a concept championed by modern behavioral psychologists. He was no longer a man trying to be disciplined. Through the reinforcement of his neural pathways, he was becoming a man who was disciplined. The ghost was being starved of its neural pathways. Every day that Elias stood in the garden or sat at his desk, the old, unmyelinated pathways of laziness were undergoing synaptic pruning. The brain, being a master of efficiency, was literally dissolving the physical structures of his old, weak self to save energy for the new, strong one. This is the neuroscience of the samurai. It is not about having a stronger heart or better genes. It is about understanding the hardware of the human machine and using ancient philosophical software to optimize it. Elias wasn't fighting his nature anymore, he was working with it. He understood that the prefrontal cortex is a muscle that must be trained, not a magic wand that can be waved. By the time he faced his improvement plan at work, his brain was no longer the disorganized mess of 3 weeks prior. It was a streamlined, myelinated engine of intention. He had moved the seat of his power from the reactive basal ganglia to the intentional prefrontal cortex. The ghost was dead because there was no longer a neural home for him to live in. 18 months have passed since Elias first stood in the gravel garden of a man he once thought was a relic of the past. If you saw Elias today, you might not recognize him, not because he has undergone a radical cosmetic overhaul, but because the very frequency he emits has shifted. The slouch is gone. The ghost has been exorcised, replaced by a man of substance, weight, and presence. He no longer walks as if he is apologizing for taking up space. He walks with Zanchin, a perpetual state of readiness and calm that commands the room before he even speaks. The transformation of Elias is most visible in the wreckage of his old life, which has been cleared away to make room for a legacy. He survived the performance improvement plan at his old firm, but he didn't stay. He realized that the version of him that was fine in a cubicle had died, and the new man required a larger arena. He transitioned into a high-stakes role in project management for a sustainable energy firm, a job that requires the exact blend of Kaizen's attention to detail and Ichinin's singular focus. He is no longer the man who almost does things, he is the man who finishes. But the true measure of his legacy isn't found in his paycheck or his job title. It is found in the quiet, domestic moments that once brought him so much shame. Remember the backyard football game? The one where Elias was a gasping, wheezing cautionary tale? Last summer, at the same family gathering, the scene repeated itself. His nephew, Leo, now 7 years old, ran up to him. But this time, Elias didn't just stand up with popping knees. He hoisted the boy onto his shoulders with a strength that felt effortless. They played for 2 hours, running, throwing, laughing. When Elias finally sat down, it wasn't to recover from a near heart attack, it was to enjoy a glass of water with his brother, Mark. Mark looked at his brother, not with pity, but with a profound, quiet respect. "You're different, El," Mark said. "It's not just the weight you lost. It's like you finally showed up to your own life. That is the essence of masculine legacy. It is the realization that your discipline is not a gift to yourself, it is a gift to everyone who relies on you." By killing his old, weak self, Elias became a pillar for his family. His mother no longer whispers about where that boy went. She looks at him with the pride of a woman who knows her son can handle whatever the world throws at him. Elias has become the man who can be leaned on, the man who provides a sense of security just by being in the room. His relationship with Susan, the woman who had watched him fade for years, has been entirely rebuilt through the principle of kintsugi. They had their cracks, they had years of resentment and silent disappointment. But Elias didn't try to hide those years. He used the gold of his new discipline to repair the bond. He applied Sajaku, silence, to their conversations, truly listening instead of waiting to speak. He applied Ikigai to their shared future, ensuring they were moving toward a common purpose rather than just coexisting in front of a television. The result is a marriage that is stronger at the broken places, a relationship that feels forged rather than just found. The most startling transformation, however, is internal. Elias has reached the stage of Shuhari known as transcendence. He no longer needs the plastic kitchen timer to remind him to be disciplined. The microtasks have merged into a seamless way of life. Discipline is no longer something he does, it is who he is. When he faces a setback, a lost contract, a personal disagreement, a physical injury, he doesn't spiral into the what the hell effect. He instinctively looks for the wabi-sabi in the situation. He asks, where does the gold go? He has built a sanctuary of the mind. His apartment, once a den of clutter and digital noise, is now a reflection of his inner state, ordered, purposeful, and calm. He has a morning ritual that involves movement, stillness, and deep work, but he isn't a slave to it. He is the master of it. He has reclaimed his time, and in doing so, he has reclaimed his soul. Elias often thinks back to the sagging sofa and the flickering lights of his old life. He doesn't look back with hatred, but with a somber recognition. That man had to die so this man could live. There was no middle ground. There was no balanced way to transition from a ghost to a hero. It required a total, scorched earth policy toward his old habits. It required the samurai's willingness to commit seppuku on his own ego. As he stands on his balcony, looking out at the city he once feared, Elias feels a deep, resonant peace. He is no longer waiting for life to happen to him. He is the architect. He is the warrior. He is the man of his word. He has moved from a life of consumption to a life of contribution, and in that shift, he found the only thing that truly matters, the self-respect that comes from knowing you have done the hard work when no one was watching. He has built a legacy of iron, one 2-minute promise at a time. Elias's story is not a fairy tale, it is a roadmap. It is a testament to the fact that the human nervous system is plastic and the masculine spirit is resilient. But stories alone do not build empires. Actions do. You are currently standing exactly where Elias stood 18 months ago. You are at the edge of the cliff. You can feel the cold wind of your own potential, and you can feel the heavy, dragging weight of your current excuses. The difference between you and the man you saw in the first chapter is not talent, it is not luck, and it is certainly not motivation. It is the application of a specific, philosophical framework. Now, I am going to give you the blueprint. This is the samurai system, stripped of its narrative and presented as a tactical order of operations. If you are serious about killing the ghost, you will write these down. Step 1. The micro-commitment, Kaizen. Identify the one area of your life where you are the most broken. Is it your health? Your finances? Your focus? Do not try to fix the whole thing. Instead, find the smallest possible unit of progress. If you want to read 1 page. If you want to exercise, do 5 push-ups. If you want to meditate, sit for 2 minutes. This task must be so small that it is impossible to fail. You are not building a habit yet, you are rebuilding your integrity. You are proving to your brain that you are no longer a liar. Step 2, the 80% rule, Harahachi-bu. Practice the art of enough. Stop eating before you are full. Stop scrolling while you are still curious. Stop working while you still have a drop of energy left. By leaving the table 20% empty, you maintain the hunger required for the next day. You prevent the bloat of the soul that leads to lethargy and relapse. Step 3, the gold of failure, wabi-sabi. When, not if, you fail, you must refuse the shame spiral. Acknowledge the break in your discipline. Look at it with the detachment of a craftsman. Do not say, I am a failure. Say, the bowl has hit the floor. Then, immediately apply the gold. Return to your micro-commitment within 24 hours. The strength of your discipline is measured not by your streak, but by the speed of your recovery. Step 4, the singular intention, ichinen. Stop being a jack of all trades and a master of none. Choose one primary objective for the next 90 days that makes everything else easier. Put 80% of your disciplined energy into that one point of contact. A spear only penetrates because all its weight is behind a single, sharpened point. Become that spear. The 14-Day Samurai Challenge. I am now issuing a challenge to everyone listening to this. This is not a suggestion. This is a protocol. For the next 14 days, you will adhere to 3 non-negotiable rules. The morning stillness, you will spend the first 10 minutes of your day in absolute silence, Sajaku. No phone, no music, no talking. Just sitting with your own mind. The micro-task, you will perform your chosen 2-minute task every single day at the same time. If you miss a day, you start the 14 days over from day 1. The digital sunset. You will turn off all screens 1 hour before bed to allow your dopamine levels to reset. This challenge is intentionally simple, yet for most of you, it will be the hardest thing you have done all year. Why? Because it requires you to be consistent when no one is watching. It requires you to value your own word over your own comfort. As we close this chapter, I want you to look at a clock. Watch the second hand as it sweeps across the face. That is the sound of your life disappearing. Time is the one resource that no amount of Japanese philosophy or modern science can ever reclaim. You can spend the next year exactly as you spent the last, drifting, consuming, and waiting for a better version of yourself to arrive. Or, you can accept the truth, that better version of you is currently being held prisoner by your lack of discipline. He is screaming to be let out, but you are the only one with the key. The environment you were born into does not define you. The neighborhood, the childhood, the past failures, they are just the raw materials. You are the artisan. You can either let the clay rot, or you can forge it into something that lasts for centuries. The path of the samurai is not about being a warrior on a battlefield, it is about being a warrior in the mundane, quiet moments of a Tuesday afternoon when you don't feel like doing the work. Subscribe to this channel if you are ready to walk this path. Leave a comment below with your microtask, declare it to the world and to yourself. We are building a brotherhood of men who refuse to be ghosts. The sun is setting on the old you. Let it go. Tomorrow, we wake up and we rake the gravel. We keep the promise. We find the gold. Be present. Walk with honor. Follow the path. I'll see you in the next video.